a life of elegance and leisure, a landowning class using their money to display their wealth through the clothes they wore, the items they used for sports such as guns, and the homes where they reside. This was the 18th century European aristocracy. The European 18th century is known as being the pronounced age of the aristocracy. During this time, the European nobility held a large portion of social, economic, and political powers, and although only consisting of 5% of the population in a given country, they were the wealthiest sector, and in many countries, they had their own separate house and parliament. They attempted to reassert their political power and social powers through embracing economic innovation and commercial enterprises. Through having the will to change their view on society in order to gain a common interest with the commercial classes, they were eager to see growth in the economy as well as protect their wealth. To be an aristocrat, one had to be birthed into it, and no matter what European country one was in, this rule was consistent. But in other respects, socially, politically, and economically, each aristocracy had its differences, whether it be in France, Great Britain, or Eastern Europe.
The English aristocracy. The aristocracy dominated the society and politics of 18th century Great Britain. It was also one of the smallest, wealthiest, and most elite nobility in all of Europe. The nobility owned 1/4 of all the land in England, and the peasants paid them rent. Many nobles had significant positions in the House of Lords and House of Commons through control of the electoral system. Their government positions gave the nobility immense power, and this allowed them to pass legislature and influence Parliament in their favor. The high involvement of the aristocracy in the national government led to economic and commercial growth. The British aristocracy invested in commerce, industries, and local businesses, largely supporting their communities. Only the eldest son was able to inherit his father's title and the House of Lords seat. Therefore, the younger sons usually became leaders in the government, military, business, church, and trade. Using these methods, the English nobility asserted their power politically and socially throughout the 18th century.
The French aristocracy. During this time, France was undergoing political, economic, and social changes now known as the Old Regime. This time period marked the rule of absolute monarchies and growing bureaucracies. Everyone was subject to Louis XIV, as well as being a member of a province and a state. In France, the nobility was divided into two different sectors, the nobles of the robe and the nobles of the sword. The nobles of the robe gained their rank from holding administrative or judicial posts, as well as through purchasing, while the nobles of the sword were the oldest class of nobility in France and gained their rank through military service. In an effort to reassert the power of the aristocracy, many French nobles did not have to pay the taille, also known as a land tax. They were able to partake in fishing and hunting privileges, and they were able to collect the feudal dues of their tenants. Socially, the old regime's main social aspects pertain to hierarchy, tradition, and privilege. With the beginning of the Industrial Revolution also making more consumer goods available, the French aristocrats used this as a way to reassert their power by displaying their wealth through the clothing they wore in places where they resided. This era of fashion in France, referred to as a Rococo fashion movement, was characterized around elegance, pastel hues, and tons of trimmings and ornamentation. With intricate architecture also becoming more prominent due to the Baroque movement, the French hierarchy displayed their wealth through the creation of Versailles. A beautiful gold palace filled with floral patterns and having a beautiful garden was created through taxing French commoners and made the Bourbons look more wealthy and powerful.
The Eastern European aristocracy.
In Eastern Europe, the nobility took various measures to reassert their power within society and the government. In Poland, nobles were exempt from taxes and aristocrats had the right of life and death over their serfs. Certain nobles that owned large amounts of land exercised significant political power. Similarly, nobles in Austria-Hungary possessed judicial powers over peasantry and manorial courts. The Junker nobles in Prussia acquired a lot more power once Frederick the Great came to power. His wars required their support, and his office was made up almost entirely from the Junker class. In Russia, there really was no noble class before Peter the Great. Creating the table of ranks, Peter gave noble social status to those who fulfilled state service. Catherine the Great exempted the highest nobles from any service and gave them special rights, expecting them to serve the state voluntarily in return. Nobles' rights include having power over their serfs, being exempt from personal taxes, and having judicial protection of their rights and property. the Charter of Nobility was part of an overall European aristocratic resurgence. Feeling threatened by the monarch's power, nobles reacted by trying to assert their social positions and special privileges. They did so by reserving specific spots in the office of armies and upper ranks of the church to ensure their exclusiveness, using the authority of existing aristocratically controlled institutions, and by increasing tax exemptions and peasant rent.
The 18th century aristocrats of Europe all aimed to reassert their powers through political, economic, and social means. Through displaying their wealth grandly, taxing peasants, owning vast plots of land, and having special privileges, their power was clearly reasserted during a time when soon after this power would be put into question with the end of the French Revolution in 1799.